And we should be live. Welcome everyone. Hi Ronnie. Hi again Tish and Suzanne and everyone. Welcome. You should be able to hear me already, hopefully. So we are live from London Waterloo. Today it is the 20th of June 2024. So if you're watching us and it's no longer 20th of June, you are watching a replay. We've got about 11 minutes before to start. So if any of you were watching the replay in the next few days, you might want to skip the next 10 minutes to go straight to the point if you wanted to skip the hellos. Hi Genevieve. Hi Pauline, nice to see you here. In the distance, straight ahead, you might see the City of London. The tall tower, it's Horizon 22. It's the tallest building in the city at the moment. So we've got about 10 minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Everything sounds perfect. Thank you, Marianne. Good to know. Let me check how long we've got. Yes, 11 minutes precisely. Duchess Suzanne. Or Sunzan, as I just accidentally spelled earlier. Why on earth would anyone want to skip the hellos? Well, I guess the hellos are fun when we are live, but when you're watching the replay later on, you probably don't really care about the hellos. Yeah. Well, you know, on YouTube you can actually see the stats. You can see the little, it's like a little curve, and some people do skip them. So fair enough, fair enough. She's Sunzan today because it's the summer solstice. Oh, actually, what time? It is summer solstice right now. Sunset is at 9:50 today, and it is 9:50 p.m. So happy solstice. Solstice. Let me show you the view. An hour ago, when I parked the bicycle, this street was buzzing. A lot of cafes and bars and restaurants had little tables on the street. I don't know if I'm hallucinating, but it feels like I could be just dreaming, but I am under the impression that the different local authorities this year, they've given more permissions in terms of having little tables on the pavement, like Parisian style, like all those cafes outside. Because even in Westminster, I was in Westminster earlier, and I was like, I swear last year this establishment didn't have that many tables outside. I could be wrong. It's nice to see people having a drink outside in the sun. This street here is semi-pedestrianized anyway, so it's all good to have tables all over the place. So we've got 8 minutes. So we're just by Waterloo station. On the back side, most people when they come to London, they'll go towards the London Eye on the other side of Waterloo. I actually prefer this side. Hi Martin, welcome. So we've got a few minutes still to get to know each other before to start. It's 2 p.m. for you in Arizona. Hold on, I think someone says... Is there any way to make donations when you're not on PayPal? Linda, yeah, you can use the YouTube button if you prefer. There's a little dollar button somewhere, so that should take you to, I'm guessing it's Google Pay or credit card pay. And there should be a link for my Buy Me a Coffee somewhere. Thank you very much in advance. Thanks to anyone, by the way, that buys me a coffee or give me a little donation. It's always very much appreciated. I'm good. I shouldn't wear a white top because, so basically my top is white and the writing is right. So the white on white I can't actually read. I should wear a black top next time because on my side I see the chat over the picture. So if the picture is very bright, it's actually very hard to see the chat. So I shouldn't have been wearing a white jumper. Yes, there should be a button with a little dollar chat. It should be at the bottom of the chat, wherever that is for you, probably on this side there. Hi Elizabeth, nice to see you here. So we've got, let me check, 6 minutes to go. Seven degrees, wow. Yeah, I guess it's winter for you in Sydney. Let me flip this camera around so you'll see a bit of the view. It's quite cool to do this tour at dusk because I think we've never done it with a bit of light. We've always done it at night, like proper late, so that's quite cool. My Buy Me a Coffee link is not showing, just PayPal. Oh, I might have messed up. Oh, I probably messed up. I know there was one occasion where somehow I couldn't pin the comment with the two, so I might have. Yeah, if you don't find the Buy Me a Coffee anywhere, you can always find it in the description. You know, in the tour description. Oh, it's showing for you. Oh, okay, good. It's nice to see so many people out and about. It's nearly 10 p.m., but it's been such a beautiful evening. It was very busy earlier on the riverside. We'll be finishing by the river, so you'll see how busy it gets on a summer night. Having a heat wave. Well, I would here I wouldn't say it's too warm here, but finally it's starting to feel like summer, so that's nice because June has been rubbish until a few days ago, really. -32°C. That's still okay, that's still survivable. And Tariq is here on the Bears, I hope. Welcome, nice to see you here. So we've got, let me see, 3 minutes to go. Summer only started 10 minutes ago. Yes, exactly. Well, actually, 8 minutes ago. Because I think here in London, sunset was 9:50. 46 Celsius for you. Wow, Matthew, wow. You had enough with you, 16 degrees. Wow. I still want to come to Arizona one day, Matthew. I need to go and see the London Bridge anyway. Right, let me check the time. 1 minute. Let me gracefully stand up to be ready to go. And Pisas is here. Welcome, Pisas. Nice to see you here. 19 Celsius for you, Mike. That's nice. Cool. Let's see. No, still 1 minute. And Mitzi is here. Welcome, Mitzi. Welcome everyone else that just joined. So we are live from Waterloo, and I'm waiting until it's officially time to start. If anyone was completely new to me, you're very welcome. Do say hello in the chat, and for anyone that doesn't know me yet, I'm Natalie, and I'll take you along for a little walk around Waterloo, a live walk with some dark history. Let me see. And it's officially time to start, so welcome everyone, and without further ado, let's flip this camera around and let's go. So, there was a lady that was here earlier. She's just stripped down. She's left her hat and shoes. I don't know where she's gone. She was just in front of me a minute ago. I don't know where she's gone. Anyway, let's go and take a look at the Leek Street Tunnel. So, it is a piece of art. It's a tunnel where you can come and paint freely. So even if you've never touched a spray can, you can come and do some art on the walls here. Today, it's not my favorite art. You'll see it's a lot of graffiti writers and a lot of little tags, I guess people that I've just tried a spray can for the first time. It changes very, very quickly here. So you can come 1 week and have a lot of amazing art, and come a few days later and it's going to be completely different. So today there's a lot of graffiti writing. So the story behind Leek Street Tunnel, this used to belong to the Eurostar. You know, the Eurostar was here from I think 1994 to 2007, and after that it was pretty much empty anyway. It was used as a taxi rack sometimes, and some drunken gentleman would also use it as a public toilet. And eventually in 2008, Banksy decided to do an event called the Cannes Festival. Cannes as a spray can. Let me show you the poster. So that's the Cannes Festival. So that was organized by the famous Banksy, the street artist. And since that day, you know what, we can actually try. Someone's left their cans there. Should we try? Do you want to do some street art? Oh no, we don't have, someone had left their cans earlier, so I saw some tourists doing it, but this one is not, you don't have the little, the little thing at the top. So yeah, you can see anyone here can come and paint. Usually though, this is not very okay. You can still see a mural underneath. Usually in the street art community, it's okay to repaint over anyone, but you're meant to repaint them fully. You shouldn't be partially covering them. That's not very nice. And let me show you the ceilings, because those are lovely. The murals on the ceilings, they stay for much longer because of course it's much. So anyone can come and paint. And apologies, it's a bit noisy down here tonight. So you could come and repaint over anybody, really. It's not the point of street art. It's not to last. It's to be seen over, Instagram, YouTube. So you better off painting your piece of art here, even if it lasts only for a week. Only a few times a day. That one. And I'm not going to go too deep into the tunnel because at some point the signal might drop a little, so we'll stop. That one is, oops, no, signal has dropped, so I'm not going to go too far down. I knew there's some point where the signal drops a little. So yeah, on this side it's a lot of calligraphy today, a lot of graffiti writing. Not that I don't like it, sometimes it's very elaborated, but tonight some of them are just little tags covering the other stuff. Anyway, let's go back out. So the average length of a piece of street art in London, it's about 3 months. So over here it's going to be much shorter. Obviously, if you were to paint a little wall in a village in Kent, it might last much longer, but only a few people a day are going to see it. When here you have a lot of people coming every day to appreciate the art. Hi Kurt, welcome. That one is nice up there, the lady's face. So yeah, the Eurostar used to be here, which is quite ironic really, because named after the battle, so it's very noisy here tonight. And of course that was the place where you took a train to go towards France. Today, of course, the Eurostar they've been moved to King's Cross, well, St Pancras to be precise. Anyway, welcome back out where it's gonna be much quieter. Now, this site was also the entrance of the Necropolis Railway at some point. The Necropolis Railway, it was a train for the dead. If you followed any of my tours before, we probably already talked about the saturation of dead bodies that we had in London at the beginning of the 19th century. Those little graveyards around the churches, they were completely saturated. The grave diggers were paid by the foot, the deeper the better, so they could fit more bodies. And with the Industrial Revolution, a lot of people moved into the capital and died in the capital. And London really struggled to bury its dead. The graveyards became smelly. It was an industry, really, a business where your bodies were being moved a few months later to make more space. Eventually, ladies couldn't even go into the graveyards anymore because of the smell. And the solution came with the creation of those amazing cemeteries on the outskirts of London, the Magnificent Seven. But you had two entrepreneurs, Richard Brown and Richard Spry. They decided to create the Necropolis Railway and the London Necropolis Company. Let me show you their logo because it's a bit creepy. And so that was their logo. They had an interesting idea. They decided to invest in a huge piece of land in Surrey, just outside of Woking, in a place called Brookwood. So they bought this huge piece of land to create the largest cemetery in the world at the time. Nowadays it's no longer the case. I think it's in Iraq today, the largest one. It's still the largest in the UK. And it was huge. I mean, it was ready to bury 28 million people. I mean, they were quite ambitious young men. And obviously, that opened in 1852. They didn't have automobiles yet, so you had to find a way to transport those bodies. So they decided to use the trains. So they opened a railway, a train line for the dead. So the first entrance was behind me by the tunnel, and they moved it to a second one. I'll show you the entrance here. But while we're here, see the pub across the street, the Crown and Cushion? We talked about that pub a few days ago when we did the tour about Thomas Neil Cream. You may remember I told you he made friends with a police officer, and he was a bit too vocal about his experience with poison, and he actually signed his own fate because he literally gave the police officer a sample of his handwriting. Well, that was in the pub across the street here, the Crown and Cushion. Yeah, Elizabeth, 28 millions, that was the plan. We are nowhere near that figure. I think they have 250,000 graves, but most of the graves there are actually individual, so it's not that many people. They were a little bit too optimistic, really, because a lot of people did not want to go and be buried that far away. So see the little arch across the street there? That was the second entrance of the Necropolis railway. Sadly, they've removed the writing, but on the top, where you have the little wide bar, that's where they had the sign, Necropolis Railway. Let me show you the first entrance on screen. So that was the original entrance. That's pretty much where we were earlier at the Leek Street tunnel. And completely unrelated, but because it's a bit bright still today, I can show you the church spire. This is the Lincoln church tower. The rest of the church is no more. It was destroyed through the Blitz. But they have a building, an office block called Lincoln's house, where the lift was haunted. Apparently I think it was in the 70s, the engineer kept being called for a lift. People kept getting stuck in the lift, but 15, 20 times, and the engineer couldn't find a reason why the lift was getting stuck. And eventually they were like, oh, that's your fault. You're the one that built a building on a graveyard. And eventually they had to completely change the lift. But even the engineer suspected a ghost. So that's in the building just behind the church spire there. Anyway, back to the Necropolis Railway. The station sadly was bombed as well, so it's only the entrance that remains. And after the Second World War, they didn't really rebuild it because, of course, by that time we had cars, so we didn't really need the trains to transport those bodies. But at the time when it was functioning, those trains would go from 10:30 in the morning with the dead as well as the living, because a lot of the living were going for the funerals, of course. The trains were divided into two sections anyway, because the Bishop of London did not want the Church of England to be mixed with the other religions. And once they got to Brookwood, you have two train stations. The first one was for the dissenters, so any other religion. The second one was for the Church of England. The local community, by the way, in Brookwood, when they heard the plan of a huge cemetery, they were not really happy. They did not want all those dead bodies. But by the second train exit, they decided to build a pub. So they were like, okay, if we have a pub, then that's fine. So finally, they were happy. And Brookwood Cemetery, some of you might have been with me. At the time of Hago, I did a little live there, but the signal was not great. In the winter, when I have a bit more time, maybe I could go back and do a video for you. They have quite a few interesting people buried there. We have, for example, a gentleman called Cosmo Duff Gordon. that's an interesting name, is one of the villain of the Titanic. Well, maybe not the villain, but he was known as the coward of the Titanic. He was accused of bribing his way into a lifeboat, and then bribing the staff on the lifeboat so they wouldn't take more people on board. His name was cleared, but he did pay. So the first lifeboat actually left with, I think it was a capacity of 24, and they left with 12 or something. And apparently he paid to not have more people on the lifeboat. So very, very dodgy. There's a character, even in the Titanic movie, there's a character that's very much inspired by Cosmo. And apparently, even the main character, Carl, at some point he grabs a little girl, he kidnaps a little girl to jump on a boat. Apparently that's also inspired by Cosmo's behavior. So anyway, he's buried there. You also have the Duchess of Argyll. You might have seen the show on the BBC. She was a lady that went through a very public divorce in the 60s. There's a show, she's being played by Claire Foy. She had a very strong sex drive for a lady, especially for an aristocratic lady. So she's buried there as well. You also had Dodi Al-Fayed, so Diana's former lover. He was buried there originally, but then they removed his body discreetly and they buried him in Mohammed Al-Fayed's property. And you have two ladies as well that we have mentioned in a couple of my tours. They were horrible baby farmers. If you remember, we talked about them, Amelia Sash and Annie Walter. In where did you talk about them? In Angel, where one of them lived. There was the lady. So she's a criminal, right? She's a baby farmer, and she moved in with a police officer. Not a very smart move when you are a criminal. And we also talked about them again when we went to Stoke Newington. I might have told you the case of Louise Massey, the French lady that was accused of killing her little toddler, 3 years old, Manfred Massey. Those baby farmers might now look like good suspects as well. They were hanged. There were some of the very few ladies hanged in the 20th century, and they had been buried originally in the grounds of Holloway Prison, but when they did some work at Holloway Prison, they moved those bodies and they reburied them in Brookwood. Somehow they have a headstone. I don't even know who paid for them to have a headstone in Brookwood, but yeah, they have one. And one thing we didn't mention, for those dead bodies in those trains. So the station was quite interesting because they had those, the Victorians were actually kind of scared of shadows. They thought some long shadows would sometimes look a bit devilish. So to avoid casting some long shadows, they did some kind of a glass roofing. So the sun would come straight above and wouldn't cast any long, shady shadows. And then once you got on the train, you actually had a class system. Would you believe, with those Victorians, you needed a class system even for the dead? So you had first, second, and third class. Well, to be honest, it was not only for the train, it also went with the burial. So when you had a first class burial, you were on the first class on the train, with a lot of velvet and all that. And once in Brookwood, you could choose the location of your grave, and you had to place a monument. You had to pay more for the monument, of course, but then you could keep the grave forever. If you were second class, you could also choose a location. You didn't have to put up a monument, but if you did not, then they reserved the right to then replace your body, reuse the grave. and if you were third class, it was only 11 shilling, but they would reuse the grave, you know, after so many years. So sadly, the Necropolis railway is no more, but the graveyard, the cemetery, is very much still there. It is huge, and you also have a space for natural burials. So you're not really allowed to be buried with no coffin at all in this country, but you can have what they call a soft coffin. It's like a forest, really. So if you happen to be a serial killer in Surrey, and if you want to get rid of a body, it's probably the best place to bury it. No one would notice. And so yeah, lovely place to visit, really. You just had an advertisement. Yes, it happens. I'm not able to completely remove them. And if you've seen on the BBC a few years ago, we had a program called Britain's Biggest Dig. Is that it? Britain's Biggest Dig. Yeah, Britain's Biggest. It doesn't sound right. Britain's Biggest Dig. Yeah, that's it. It was about a little graveyard in Houston that was being exhumed, and they had a full team of archaeologists there, and it was filmed. Well, all those bodies after the TV show, they were actually reburied in Brookwood. A lot of the local parishes in London, when they were saturated, they Britain's Biggest Dig. I think that's right. Yeah, Britain's Biggest Dig. They literally digged up a full Victorian graveyard. Well, there were two actually. There was one here in London and one in Birmingham. Yeah, when you go to Brookwood, you can see different areas. You can see Lambeth, Southwark, because a lot of the local parishes, they actually bought a plot there once their local churches were completely full. And so yeah. Yeah, dig, mate, yeah. Biggest Dig. I think that's right. It sounds wrong, but I think that's right. Britain's Biggest Dig, I think it was called. I've watched it. How can I not remember the title? But yeah, it was an interesting show, but a bit because some of those bodies were still, I don't know how the archaeologists can do that. I'll be vomiting, but yeah. Anyway, the beautiful building behind the trees there with the light, this is the Old Vic Theatre. It is, it's today called the Old Vic. It was not always, because when it was first opened, Victoria was definitely not very old yet. It opened in 1818, and at the time it was called the Royal Coldberg Theatre, and it was then renamed the Royal Victoria Theatre, and now it's the Old Vic. At some point it was rebranded, or at least nicknamed the Blood Tub, because apparently a lot of the plays were very bloody inside. And guess what? They have a ghost. Well, they have two ghosts. The first one is the ghost of a young actor. Well, we think is the ghost of a young actor, you know. We always try to find some contendant for those ghosts. But right after the First World War, through the cast, they had a play. It was going to be Julius Caesar, and through the cast, 4 of the actors died of the Spanish flu. One of those young actors was a gentleman called Eric Ross. He died before the start of the play. He was going to play Brutus, so of course he was replaced, as were the other actors. But on the first performance, the first evening, a lot of the audience, apparently, they saw on stage the group of actors, you know, it was like 4 of them, and one random actor standing far away from them, looking just a bit odd, you know, like an outcast. So they believe it was the ghost of Eric Ross that wanted to be on stage, you know. He was meant to be before to die, so it could be. And the other ghost is a bit more mysterious. Apparently, there's also the ghost of a lady. She looks a bit distressed, and she's got blood on her hand, fake blood, actor's blood. It is said that she might be the ghost of Lady Macbeth. Who knows? Anyway, beautiful theatre. And there's another lady that might have frequented the site. Her name is Eliza Grimwood. She's gonna be our next murder victim, sadly. Eliza was a young girl from Suffolk in East Anglia. She grew up in a farm. She had a lot of siblings, and sadly she lost her dad quite young. As a teenager, luckily she was able to study despite the financial situation of the family, so she was fairly well educated, but at the age of 15 her mother said, "You've got to go and work, you've got to help me." So she took a job in service as what they called at the time a lady of company. She worked for a family that had a young girl that suffered from some kind of disability, so Eliza was paid to be like a carer and to keep her company. And as she was working in that family, she started to have an affair with the older brother of the disabled girl. And Eliza was apparently a very, very pretty young girl. And sadly, she fell pregnant. Now, the pregnancies out of wedlocks in Victorian times. I say Victorian time, it was very early Victorian time. Actually, when she got pregnant, Victoria was probably not on the throne yet. But at that point, when you fell pregnant out of wedlocks, your life was gonna be stained by the stigma of that pregnancy. Your prospect of career, work, everything was going away from you. So very sadly, the decision of making or trying to have an illegal abortion was made by society, So poor little Eliza, with her boyfriend, they decided to come to London. So he took her to London. He gave her some money for an illegal abortion, but he dumped her here. He gave her some money and he was like, bye. She never came back to Suffolk. She probably did have the abortion because we don't know of her having any babies, but probably because of the shame that she was gonna have to explain to her family, or we don't know why, but she never went home. We believe that at that point she had an affair with a young actor, a stage actor. Then she might have also dated a robber, a burglar, and apparently she was helping him, so they nearly got caught by the Bow Street runners, and she might that might be when she stopped. Sorry, we've got some very loud music here. Then she was said to have dated a colonel in the army, and then she started working in the sex trade. It is Waterloo station here across the street. We spoke about Victorian prostitution in my tours before, mainly when we talked about Jack the Ripper. I'm gonna wait because it's a bit noisy. I'm gonna wait. Just gonna wait until you can hear me properly. By the way, completely unrelated, but this is the Wellington pub. We talked about that pub a few days ago when we talked about Thomas Neil Cream. It is here in front of the pub that Ellen Darnworth, a sex worker as well, fell down after being poisoned by the doctor. Anyway, back to Eliza. So yeah, we talked about prostitution in Victorian times, but we talked about the lower class prostitutes of Whitechapel, those unfortunate. Would you believe in Victorian times, even with prostitutes, you had a class system? So Eliza was, let's say, an upper class sex worker. She was a very pretty lady, very well educated, And she actually spent her night in the theaters. This class of prostitutes, you'd have to take them out. You'd have to take them to the theater or to a restaurant. You'd probably call them an escort today, really. And some of them could make decent money. Some of them were actually fairly satisfied with their job because they could do that for a few years. And then, by the age of 27, 29, they might have saved enough money to open a cafe shop or maybe a bar or a pub, and then they could live a so-called respectable life. And that was exactly the case with Eliza. She was fairly satisfied with her earnings, and she actually lived a lifestyle that was, sorry, everything is very noisy tonight. Her lifestyle was actually quite expensive. She dressed very well. She was nicknamed the Duchess. And that's at that point that she met her cousin, William Hubbard. And they actually used to be lovers back in Suffolk when they were young. Hubbard was already married, but they fell in love anyway, so he dumped his wife, he kicked her out, and he got in a couple with Eliza. They were cousins, but at the time, they did that a lot. And then obviously William was not massively excited about Eliza's job as a sex worker. Yes, Kurt, I've read that book. Bondeson did a great amount of research on the case. So Hubbard, of course, was not happy with Eliza's job, but she did not want to stop. He was a bricklayer, so he had an income, but she wanted to keep going. So eventually they came into an agreement. Job, and then Hubbard was gonna take a little commission out of it. So he literally lived on the proceeds of her sex work. A bit dodgy, really, but that's a situation that they were happy with, the both of them. And of course, we can imagine that every so often William must have been jealous, because this type of sex workers, they had long-term customers, which was actually much better in terms of venereal disease. The risk was lower than if you had 5 customers in a night. But those gentlemen would take them to the restaurant, would send them letters. So it did sound a bit like a love story, really. So we could imagine that every so often William might have been a bit jealous. But according to their flatmate, they didn't quarrel much. This is the beautiful St. John's Church, by the way. It is here in the graveyard that Eliza is buried. She doesn't have a grave today, but that's where she was buried. And across the street, there used to be a hotel called the York Hotel. That's where they did the inquest. It would have been just there across the street. Now, Eliza and William, they lived behind me at 10 Waterloo Wellington Terrace. I'll show you the location in a moment. They didn't live on their own. They lived in one of those Victorian terraces with 3 flatmates. So on the ground floor, you had Eliza and Hubbard. Not really in the same room. William slept in the parlor because, of course, Eliza sometimes brought back customers. And upstairs you had Mary Fisher, she was a maid, and you had Mary Clover, another sex worker, a good friend of Eliza, with her boyfriend, another William. And according to everyone in the flat share, everything was fine. There was no argument or anything. 26th of May, 1838, Eliza went for a night out, as usual. She went to the theater. At the time, the theaters were full of sex workers. As long as they paid the entrance and they behaved, the theater owners were happy with them. And they would still a church with concert venue. Oh yeah, nice. They also have a homeless charity in the graveyard, so they often do some charity work here. So yeah, that night everything was fine. She went to the Strand Theatre. The theatre doesn't stand today, but to give you an idea, if you know London well, we have a ghost train station on the other side of the river at the beginning of the Strand. It used to be called the Strand, but it's no longer a tube station. The theatre was right next to it. Eliza was seen inside. She was having some drinks with some other sex workers at first, and then her customer arrived. They described him as a foreigner. A young man, quite attractive, very well dressed, looking quite rich. No one really agrees on his nationality. They said he was either French or Italian. No one is too sure. He definitely did have an accent. His English was very good, but he did have an accent. They were not quite sure whether it was French or Italian though. And so she spent the night at the theatre with the foreigner. They then exited the theatre. They jumped on a cab. One of those, they were called the hackney carriages, you know, those horse and carriages that they had in Victorian times. So they crossed over the river with the taxi. They stopped around here where Eliza lived, at Wellington Terrace. They got out of the cab. Eliza petted the horse. She said, "You've got a beautiful horse," to the driver. She paid the fare and they left. Nothing out of the ordinary. They arrived at Eliza's place. And Mary Fisher, the maid, actually opened the door. So she saw the foreigner for a few seconds, but he was kind of hiding his face with his hat, so she couldn't recognize him. And Eliza and the foreigner went to bed, or at least they went into her bedroom. The next morning, William wakes up very early, maybe 5 or 6 a.m., and he noticed that Eliza's door was slightly opened, which was a bit unusual because at that time usually she was still in bed. He wouldn't just go and open it though, because obviously she could still be with a customer. So he slowly pushed the door and he was like, "Eliza, Eliza." She did not reply. So he tried again, "Eliza, Eliza," pushed the door, and then he found her on the floor in a pool of blood. She had clearly been brutally attacked. He stepped in there, so he had a bit of blood on his shoes, but that was it. He then went outside and screamed, "Murder, murder," to alert the police. Then he woke up Mary Fisher and the rest of the flat share. And we are now on Rupert Street. Rupert Street, it's a conservation area. It looks pretty much exactly the same as Eliza Grimwood would have seen it in 1838. The street was built in 1824 by John Ruppel, that's why it's called Rupert Street, and it has been used as a filming location for quite a few movies, including James Bond or EastEnders, because it looks so authentic. Apart from a few cars that are a bit too modern, but everything else looks pretty much like Eliza would have seen it. So Eliza is in a pool of blood. Quickly, the police officers arrived. The police was still fairly new. They had existed only for 9 years. The Metropolitan Police was created in 1829, remember? So they had to fight for their reputation. You know, they still had to gain their reputation. So they were working really hard to try to solve the cases. They didn't really quite have a detective system in place yet. And the first police officer actually concluded it was suicide. And the second one came in, Frederick Field. He flipped the body over, and she clearly had a big gash on her neck, in the back of her neck. So clearly it couldn't have been suicide. Then, of course, Hubbard was the first suspect, you know, because when they heard about the way those two lived, when they heard that he lived on the proceeds of her sex work, he was obviously a very strong suspect straight away. Eliza's family hated him. Eliza had a little niece called Chaplin, Elizabeth Chaplin, I think her name was, and she hated him. She said he used to carry a knife. and she said that Eliza had a lover from Birmingham, a sword maker. There was another young lady, Catherine Edwin. She was, she pretended to be 19 years old. She said she was another sex worker, a very good friend of Eliza. She said they used to go out together and that she knew the foreigner very well. He was French or Italian, very well dressed. He was very much in love with Eliza. And he took them to a shop and she could definitely recognize him. He took them to buy some sweets and blah, blah, blah. And Mary Clover, that was probably Eliza's best friend, the flatmaid, she had a bit of a doubt about that young girl because she had never heard of her. How come would Eliza never mention her? And through the inquest, when it was pretty much exposed that the young girl was a liar, she was actually 16. She was pretending to be 19, but she was 16. So she was busted. Apparently, she did, I quote, a hand gesture to the magistrate. I'm guessing it's a middle finger, but I don't know. And then she pulled a face to the police officer and she ran away. So not the most reliable witness. There was another guy, a Welsh guy that lived around here. He claimed that very morning he was out. He was out and he spotted Hubbard coming out of the flat, full of blood, and he looked at the sky and he screamed, "I did the deed!" And that Welsh guy originally seemed like a normal local resident, but they realized quite straight away that he was a bit eccentric, let's say. He lived around here in a home full of young girls, starving young girls, pretending to be his daughters, but they realized that they were actually sex workers. So he was a bit like a Welsh Fagin. So not very reliable either. And they also received a letter known as the Cavendish letter. The letter at first was taken fairly seriously because on the site, in the bedroom, the killer or someone had left a pair of lavender gloves. And the police took them very seriously. They tried really hard to find the owner of those gloves. And in the Cavendish letter, the writer pretended to be the customer. They claimed that they had gone home with Eliza that night. They did not have time to do much because Hubbard was there very unhappy, very jealous, and they started to have an argument. So he left and he forgot his pair of black gloves behind him. So although there was a mistake with the color of the gloves, the police didn't really make it very public that gloves were left behind. So they took that letter seriously and they had to arrest poor William Hubbard. Well, I say poor, we don't know. He might have been guilty. So Hubbard was arrested. He was taken to Horsemonger Lane prison in between Elephant and Castle and Borough. We have been there together. Remember when we talked about the Manning case? That was a tour about Catherine Eddowes. So we've been there once. I should take you there again. So he was taken to prison, and to be fair, they had to take him to prison because Eliza's brother had come here, and they had actually paid him to leave the house, and then they called the police pretending that he was trying to escape, to do a runaway. So they did arrest him, and that's when the brothers, they made a lot of money by selling everything in the house. They sold the bed that was blood stained. You know, that was already a big sensation in the newspaper. So people wanted to buy some gruesome souvenirs of the Eliza Grimwood case. It seems crazy today, but yeah. They even removed the carpet and they sold it to a guy, the blood-stained carpet. And that guy had a smart idea. He actually cut the carpet in little squares, little pieces, so he sold those. So he made a fortune as well. The brothers were probably quite jealous that they didn't have this idea themselves. That's quite sad, they even sold the dog. So Eliza had a little dog that did not bark through the night. Everything was quiet that night. Was it maybe because he knew the attacker, that the little dog did not bark? Who knows? What we do know is that the brothers actually sold that little dog to a pub, the Gun in Spitalfield. We've actually seen the Gun in my Jack the Ripper walk. We've seen the pub. The pub used it to promote themselves, because of course people would want to come. They'd want to come and spend an evening in the pub to see the dog that did not bark through the infamous murder of Eliza Grimwood. Eliza Grimwood became almost like a byword for murder mystery, because the murder was never solved. William died about 2.5 years later. He never fully recovered, although he was released from prison because they didn't have any evidence against him. I mean, everything was consistent with him being innocent, to be honest. He had his reaction was quite normal. He went quite far down into alcohol. Oh, thank you so much, Elizabeth. That's very, very nice of you. He had 7 shirts. None of them was blood-stained. They found the 7 shirts. So how would he have managed? Despite all that, everyone suspected him. So he couldn't go out. People on the street would throw tomatoes or feces at him or whatever. So he didn't really recover, and he died. Apparently, when he died, he saw Eliza. Apparently, he said out loud, "Eliza, Eliza, I'm coming, rescue me." So William died. The case was never solved. Now, there have been, there's one suspect in particular in the book that Kurt mentioned earlier. It's called the Ripper of Waterloo Road. The author has done a great amount of research on the case, and he comes up with one suspect that could indeed be the man. At the time, they didn't really have a concept of a serial killer. They always believed that a murderer would have a motive. They couldn't really compute the idea of someone doing that for pure pleasure. And they didn't necessarily look at other cases in terms of a series, If they had done, a year earlier, there was another murder, another Eliza, funnily, Eliza Davis. She was killed on Frederick Street, so that's next to Clerkenwell, King's Cross, really. Let's see how much that would be there's one here on Rupert Street. Let's see how much. 1.5 million. How many bedrooms? Grade 2 listed, freehold. Oh, that's a freehold, that's good. 3 bedrooms, that's not too bad. Well, out of my budget, but not too bad. Anyway, so Eliza Davis was a barmaid. She lived in the pub, she lived above the pub where she worked. She did seem to have earnings that might have been slightly above what she would be expected to make in a pub. So she potentially was topping up her income with sex work. And she had a young lover that was described as attractive and French. And one day she was found murdered by her bedroom above the pub. Same thing, they never found the killer. It was also knife crime. So he would fit the description of the foreigner in the case of Eliza Grimwood. So it could indeed be the same man. Now there's another link that's a little bit more tenuous, really, but there was a gentleman called Mr. Westwood that was quite rich and that was known to be keeping a lot of his money in cash at home. One day he was burglared by 2 men. They were seen, it's green men, thank you. They burgled his home and they killed him. 2 men were seen running outside of the crime scene. They stole the money on their run. One of them was identified as being a young man from Switzerland. that worked for him and that had been sacked. It was suspected that they escaped to America, and a police officer was actually sent to America to investigate, but he never came back. Some have speculated that he might actually have located the two men, and they might have decided to split the money, and he might have stayed in America. We'll never know. The only link here is that the guy was from Switzerland, so the second guy might have been from Switzerland as well, because a couple of years after Eliza Grimwood, there was another case that made the headlines. It was the case of Lord Russell. Lord Russell was a lord at Parliament. He was quite a rich man. He lived on Park Lane, so just outside of Hyde Park. And one night he was killed in his bed. The room had been ransacked. It looked like a burglary, but the police had suspicions that it might have been staged. It might have been made to look like a burglary when it wasn't. And they suspected one of his valets, François Benjamin Courvoisier. He was a young man from Switzerland, from a municipality in Switzerland where they speak both French and Italian. And he had no blood on anything in his outfit, but he was the owner of a Macintosh, so he could have used that to avoid the blood stain. That could be what he did for Eliza as well. And eventually they caught him because he had a few items that he had stolen from Russell that were found in his possession, and he was caught trying to sell some cutlery from the Russell household into a hotel in Leicester Square where he used to work. So he was caught. He quickly confessed of killing Russell. So he was going to be hanged. At the time, one murder was more than enough to be hanged. And apparently, as he was jailed in Newgate prison before his execution, there's an article that came out in the Times newspaper. The Times was usually quite a reputable newspaper. They claimed that Courvoisier had confessed of the two murders, Eliza Davis and Eliza Grimwood, in prison. A couple of days later, the Times newspaper had to retract that article. Officially, it was only gossip. People have speculated then that it might have been the authorities that wanted to retract it because they did not want the execution to be too busy, because we still had public executions at the time, and he had 15,000 people turning up at his execution, including a gentleman you might have heard of, Charles Dickens. So, but it really doesn't make sense. Why would they have to retract the article because of that? Some people also believe that Courvoisier's uncle had visited him in prison, and he had tried to convince him not to confess. So we will never know. He does look like a good suspect, if you ask me. He would have definitely fit the physical descriptions, French, Italian. He was only a valet, but he was known to live above his station. He was outside in the West End a lot, and he was frequenting a lot of the sex workers. So that would be a match. The foreigner thing, though, I mean, not half, but 40% of the population in Victorian times were already immigrants. You already had a lot of French speakers, so, it doesn't mean anything. Anyway, this beautiful building here, so that's the Royal Waterloo Hospital for Children and Lady. And the location, it is here. So 12 Wellington Terrace, Waterloo Road. It's a bit confusing because in Victorian times, they often had, when they had a batch of terraces, they often had their own number. So it was 12 Wellington Terrace, Waterloo Road. Today we are only on Waterloo Road. There's no, Wellington Terrace was completely demolished, but this was the site. Today it's a campus for King's College University. And this beautiful building, the Royal Waterloo Hospital, it has a bit of dark history as well. It closed in 1976, mainly because of the bad reputation that they had because of a doctor, William Sargent. He was a very controversial psychiatrist. He was into what we called sleep therapy. He would drug girls. A lot of ladies came here because of mental health and anorexia and this type of problems. He would drug them and put them to sleep for weeks. They had a room, Ward 5, known as the narcotic room, where ladies would sleep. Today the technique still exists. It is known as brainwashing. And actually Sargent might have worked for the Secret Services as well. I've listened today to a few interviews of his, I was going to say victims, his patients. Some of them have forgotten large chunks of their lives. They don't remember giving birth or anything. Some of them were sleeping for like 3 months. They would be waken up every so often to go to the loo, but they were completely doopy with the drugs. They would eat as well, because there's a doctor in Australia that actually kind of copied the technique, but he used to have them feed with tubes, and 25 of them died in Australia. So very, very controversial doctor, and that's part of the reason why after his retirement the hospital closed. I wonder if the students inside today have a clue that they are sleeping in a site with two very dark history. Anyway, the location, the house, after the murder, it was empty for a while. No one wanted to take the lease on the property. Eventually, a gentleman from Germany took the lease a few years later. He probably wasn't fully aware of the full story. I'm not gonna stay here too long because of the music. I don't want any copyright strike. But look, this is a pétanque bar. It's as far as I know, it's new, or at least I've not noticed it last year. But it's to play pétanque. It's called Bull Bar, which sounds a bit dirty, Bull Bar, because bull is balls in French, but yeah, it's like balls bar. It sounds a bit dirty to me, but yeah, it's looks quite fun. Anyway, the murder itself potentially might have inspired Charles Dickens when he wrote Oliver Twist. So if you remember, in Oliver Twist, there's this beautiful character called Nancy. She's a sex worker. Her husband, her boyfriend, is also a pimp, Bill Syke, and she is murdered in the book it's in her home, not far from London Bridge. In the movie from the 60s, they actually have her murdered right by the London Bridge, but in the book it's in her bedroom. Bill Syke, the murderer, doesn't have any blood on himself, but there's a little dog, he's got blood on his paws. So you see a few similarities here. Although Hubbard was not a pimp, he did live partially on the proceeds of her sex work. She lives, Eliza lived right by the Waterloo Bridge. So see, that's the Waterloo Bridge here, that's the beginning of the bridge. And Nancy lived by the London Bridge. Although the dog here was not bloody, or maybe he was, I don't know, but that was not a point of interest. But you know, you have a little dog as well. So there are a few similarities between the stories. And actually, you know what, when Dickens published Oliver Twist, he was fairly heavily criticized because of the violent way in which he killed Nancy. But it's fair to imagine that Dickens himself might have been shocked by this murder, and that probably very much inspired him in the writing of Oliver Twist. Who knows? And Dickens was also quite good friend with Frederick Field, the inspector on the case. Field, he retired a few years after the crime, but he never actually gave up. Although he was retired, he kept investigating. Although nothing ever came to light, you know, you had literally no forensics at the time, so it was very, very difficult to solve a murder. And thank you, Kurt. And one last little murder before we go. So on my left-hand side, the building to the left, it's the Waterloo Bridge. Today we often refer to it as, my bicycle is still here, so that's a good sign, because this is a dodgy spot. They tried to take my bike from here before. We often call it the Ladies' Bridge now, because they started the construction in 1939. So that's of course when World War II broke out. So the young men, they had to go fighting on the continent. So the ladies were left in charge in London, and they finished the Waterloo Bridge. Some say that it was the only bridge that was finished on time. That's probably not true, but yeah. And sadly, the Waterloo Bridge was also the spot of an assassination. Just above there, there's a little bus stop. And in 1978, you had a young man called Gorgi Markov. He was originally from Bulgaria. He was on his way to work. He worked as a, hello, young man that wants to be on camera. He worked as a BBC, as a journalist. And hello again. And he was on his way to the BBC waiting for his bus when he got hit by an umbrella in the back of his leg. The gentleman with the umbrella ran into a taxi, and he didn't think much of it on the spot, but then he felt very funny. He went to the BBC anyway, but he could feel his heartbeat going a bit funny. He told his colleague at the BBC, but they didn't take him seriously. Gorgi had the reputation to be often exaggerating. And he said to them, oh, I might have been poisoned by the KGB. I'm going to go into hospital. So he actually left. He went to St. George's in Tooting. He checked himself into hospital. He got into the emergency services, and he said to them, I've been poisoned by the KGB. Now, it's not that they didn't take him seriously, but you know, it's not every day that you have KGB poisoning. So they actually doubted his sanity, and he died in hospital. When they did the autopsy, he had a little pellet in the back of his thigh muscle, a tiny little pellet that would have been used to store the poison, ricin. So the umbrella was a jab. We know those umbrellas exist because we've got one in Florida. There's a spy gadget museum in Florida. So he knew that he might be targeted because back home in Bulgaria, he was a playwright. He had written some plays that were let's say quite critical of the Bulgarian government, president / dictator Zhirkov. You know, Zhirkov was one of the closest allies of the Soviet Union through the Cold War. So, and the Bulgarians wouldn't have the technology to do those umbrellas, so they probably were indeed helped by the KGB. So yeah, when you see James Bond and stuff, this type of events really do. Oh no, I've got the same bug as last time. Man, what's that? Okay, now. Oh, I thought these problems were over. I've completely lost the chat, guys. It's absolutely fine because I was gonna say bye-bye anyway. It's the end of the tour. But I've lost the chat, I've lost everything, so I cannot show you my face again. I'm just gonna try to. All right, Prism, little bug. I'm just gonna try to. No. No, everything is gone. I can type in the. No. Oh, no. I've got. Oh, yes, it's back. That's interesting. I just tried to type in the chat to tell you bye-bye in the chat in case you couldn't hear me, and everything is back. Perfect. Well, I'm glad. So then I can show you my face again. Yeah, you can see St. Paul's in the distance there. So that's the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral. And so we are on the south bank now. So across the river, you see behind St. Paul's, you see the City of London. And down this way, it is Westminster. So this is the beautiful Waterloo Bridge, well lit up. Thanks ever so much, Pauline. That's very nice of you. Let me show you my face again. So if any of you dropped me a little tip on PayPal or on Buy Me a Coffee, that's very, very much appreciated. And thanks, Maria, and thanks, Sarah, thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you, Sam. If you have any questions before we go, do let me know in the chat. If not, thanks ever so much for joining me again. It's always a pleasure to have you live with me. If any of you were completely new to me, hope you'll give me a follow and you'll join us next time. The next one, oh, it's the first one since Hego. Oh, amazing to have you back, Bronwyn. Welcome back. My next tour is going to be on Monday. We're going to Dover. So that's going to be interesting with tales of smugglers and all that. So Dover is the main gateway into France, with a beautiful castle as well. Thank you, Gabriella. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. Thanks for all your support, and hopefully I'll see some of you on Monday. If not, the week after that we're heading to Bognor Regis, so that should be fun as well. So we're going to the beach twice. Oh, you know what? I know how to say beach now. Look, I'll show you with a light. Look, if you want to say beach, you give a kiss. Beach. If you want to say the seaside, you smile. Beach, 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 beach. Easy. It took me 17 years to realize. It's not very convenient though, because if you want to say something very dramatic about the beach, you know, like if you want to say, oh, I've always blamed you for his drowning. You know, you're the one that wanted to take him to the beach. But at least I know how to say it. It just goes with the facial expression. So it's not always very convenient to smile. It's a bit weird to have a language when you have, but it works with sheep as well. You know, ship, the boat, sheep. So you have to smile, and then it goes a long E. I never knew. Anyway. So yeah, not that useful when you don't want to smile, but when you can smile, it's easy. Now I know. So I know how to tell the difference between sheep on sheep, beach on beach, feast on feast. Easy. Anyway, guys, thank you for coming tonight. I'll see you on Monday, and have a great evening or a great morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. Bye bye.